Welcome to the Leaders Learning from Leaders podcast. I'm pleased today to welcome Dr. Wesley Smith to the podcast. Dr. Smith is currently the superintendent of Newport-Mesa Unified School District in California, and he assumed that role in 2021. He has served as a school and district leader, as well as an educator and student advocate at both the state and federal levels. In addition, Dr. Smith was a past executive director of the Association of California School Administrators. Welcome, Wesley.
Yeah, Steve, thank you. Very glad to be here. Honored to be invited.
For starters, you want to tell us a little bit about the Newport-Mesa Unified School District?
Yeah, love to. Newport-Mesa Unified School District is here in Orange County, California. It's a really interesting district in that it serves two very different cities and a community. So we serve Newport Beach and we serve Costa Mesa, also the community of Corona del Mar. And we have great diversity in this district. We have schools with zero free or reduced lunch, and we have schools in other parts of our district that have well over 90% free or reduced lunch. We have about 18,000 students. So here in California, that's a medium-sized district, a small medium. About 33 schools. Our schools are broken up. We have about 16 Title I schools, which is interesting because we're a community-funded district, which means that our property taxes exceed what the state of California is required to give us for funding. Right? So they would consider us a well-funded school district, but we have 16 of our 33 schools that are low-wealth schools. Again, speaking to that diversity, about 15% of our students are identified as special education. 50% of our students are English language learners. Overall, district-wide, about 58% free reduced lunch. And our largest student demographic, and for people that know Newport Beach and that know Orange County, California, they're surprised to find that our largest student demographic is Latinx at about 42%.
So you've been 3 years in the district?
3 years, that's right.
So what are some of the key focus areas you kind of had to jump on with your arrival there and get to work through during these first 3 years?
I think the first priority was to listen and learn. I told the board, the boards are always great about give us your 90-day plan. And I gave it to them. First 30 days, I'm going to listen and learn. The second 30 days, I'm going to listen and learn. And the third 30 days, I'm going to listen and learn. They're like, well, what else? And I said, well, what's more important than that? If I were to come in here with all the answers, that would be a bit disingenuous, don't you think? And so it's been important for me to mostly and primarily listen to our students to understand their aspirations, their dreams, their hopes for what they expect from and need out of education. Listening to our community members, because again, it's a diverse community. What are their expectations for public education, for our system? And then listening to our employees, certificated classified management. How do they see the work? How can I best support them? What tools do they need to, again, meet those diverse needs of every student? So a lot of it was just listening. And then I'm big on climate and culture. How do we create cultures of inclusivity, of belonging and connectedness? How do we create cultures of owning the opportunity every day to meet and exceed the needs of every single student? Right? This is my chance. This is my day in the sun, right? To help and serve and really inspire our students to be and do their best. And so again, that ownership, that culture of belonging, connectedness, that environment and inclusivity where every adult and every student feels seen, heard, valued, and safe. So that was a big part after listening and being in the community all day, every day, to start really working on the culture and climate.
So it's real evident as I'm listening to you that you can't tackle that without listening. Um, so I am wondering, as a superintendent, how do you go about hearing student voices and listening to students? Did you have a way that you tackled that?
Yeah, so we have some formal structures that we have here. I have a student advisory council, so I meet with students 4 times a year from each of our zones, and we get together. And my first question with students is, I call it "Say what," and that's basically what are you hearing, seeing, feeling? What's going on? That's the first agenda topic, and oftentimes in our meeting, that's all we cover. Right? Is because I'm there also to share some of what we're doing with them, but they get so engaged in sharing what they're hearing, seeing, feeling on campus that becomes the meeting. We finish with what gives you hope, right? So the students are able to say what in their environment gives them hope, and often, almost always, it's an educator, it's a teacher, it's an administrator, someone that's there inspiring them. And then in between, we try to solve some challenges together. So I do that. That's a formal structure. But I spend as much time as I can at school sites. Um, I I despise my office. You can see it behind you. There's nothing wrong with it, except there's a major thoroughfare behind me, so it's noisy. But the office is fine. I just don't want to be here. I want to be out at school campuses, watching students interact and learn, watching teachers teach and leaders lead. And so when I'm out there, I'm asking questions. I often spend time in passing periods on our campuses. So we're just interacting with students, asking about the facilities. It's amazing. I heard this quote a long time ago. I think Colin Powell said, every day I go out with my troops and I'm intentionally ambushed. I walk around every day and just listen so that they're telling me what's wrong. They're telling me what's wrong before it becomes a problem. Right. My boots are of poor quality. The mess hall is horrible, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like if I'm out there, if I'm amongst the students and our staff, I'm hearing things. I can address them before it becomes an issue. Right. We say here, deal with the snowflake before it becomes an avalanche. Right. So I'm out there monitoring the snowflakes to the best of my ability.
Very cool. In doing a little prep work on my part for the podcast, I read a little bit of your history where I found the description that said you take a systems approach to student achievement and narrowing achievement gaps. And I'm wondering if you'd give me a little detail on what systems approach means to you.
Yeah, I think my mom wrote my bio and she just makes stuff up. I think she said I could slam dunk a basketball in one of my bios. No, for me, it's always been about how do we ensure that our success is not haphazard, that it's intentional and it's across the board. And so, we understand that systems are made up of, people and processes, groups of people and processes, and that within systems there are microsystems. And so how do those microsystems in public education impact the overall student wellness and achievement, right? And so we look at those processes with regard to those people at every level, from the classroom to the boardroom, right? What is the interconnectedness of those microsystems? Where are those engagement points where we can really leverage some innovation or and where are the challenges that we could do there? And some specific examples, right? When I got here, there wasn't curricular coherence at all. Okay, we had decentralized site autonomy, and so folks were teaching a plethora of things. Only accidentally, the board adopted core content, right? So when we would have professional learning community meetings, it was like a convening at the Tower of Babel. Everyone's speaking a different language. How could we talk about the successes or challenges we're having because we're all playing from a different script? And so one of the first things we did here is we said, hey, for our core content, we will have curricular coherence. And we know the research is clear on this, right? That's one of the first things you have to have. And so system-wide, we're all now reading from the same script, right?
Right.
And then we get to, well, how do we have those organized times to really lean into how we're doing and how do we do better? And so we've negotiated with our amazing allies here in our labor partners, dedicated time every week for professional learning teams to get together. But we also know that if we don't have throughout the district at the elementary and secondary level the same types of metrics, then once again, even though we're teaching from the same script, if you will, we're teaching from the core content, and that's guaranteed and universal throughout the district. If we don't have a way of assessing how we're doing this similar in all places, then still the data isn't coherent, congruent. So for us, we've been working on common assessments and really letting our teachers and our classified staff and our site leaders develop those to the extent we can. So there's buy-in, and it's not summative. We're talking about formative assessments where they can on the spot figure out a way to get better. Most recently, our secondary math teachers developed math assessments to be used district-wide at the secondary level. It took them about 2 years to do that. But instead of just buying something off the shelf, we wanted them to have a real buy-in to that. And then I would just say, because I know I've gone too long in this answer, but again, if all these microsystems impact your outcomes, that includes things like, of course, nutrition, right? We know that more nutritious meals better develop the brain, right? And the science behind nutrition and achievement are solid, right? We also know that if students have desirable meals that are also nutritious, well, then they'll eat. They'll actually eat, right? Which is going to help learning. And so we looked at how does our nutrition services department improve achievement in our district? Not just wellness, but academic achievement, right? We also know the environment students learn in impact their self-concept, which ultimately impacts their efficacy, right? So what is the standard throughout our district, in every classroom, in every office, for what it should look like and feel like for 21st century learning for all students? And so again, all these little systems, a part of the bigger system. And then the trick is, how do you have communication loops throughout? And we're working on that. I mean, this is all a work in progress, but convening groups. We have what we call a student achievement leadership team, where we bring together certificated, classified, and management folks, representatives from every school site, right? So we have 85 people in a room talking about the most important work we do. What are you seeing in the classrooms so that it impacts what's happening in the boardroom? And we're not perfect, but we believe a focus on those types of activities throughout the district will help us get closer to that.
So I had prepped a question here that I'm going to go ahead and use, but I'm kind of predicting the answer, having heard your response to your systems approach. I'm wondering to what extent you describe continuous educator learning as a critical element in continuous student success.
Yeah. I mean, look, if the research is true, I believe it is, that the adults in the classroom, in the office, right, impact student outcomes, then their capacity and capability has to be continuously improved and enhanced, right? Just like our students, right? They're never done learning. We tell them to be lifelong learners. One of the greatest things you can ever be is a lifelong learner. But I have learned everything I need to learn, right? I mean, no one buys that. And so, I believe strongly that no matter how long you've been doing this work, no matter how successful you are, we can always get better. I remember Tiger Woods winning the US Open by, I think, 20 strokes. And he went out after a record-setting tournament, and he turned the lights on at Pebble Beach and hit balls. They're saying, "What's your problem?" He said, "There was a problem with my swing," right? You just set a record, right, for strokes won in a master, or not a Masters, but in a U.S. Open. So we can always get better. We should be getting better. But I think we have to be intentional about what capacity and capability enhancements we need to better suit our students. So if it's this haphazard thing, is that really going to get us to where we want to be? So intentionality, right, about that. There's got to be buy-in. There's got to be interest in it. And it's got to be for everybody. I mean, I teach at USC in their doctoral program. I've been doing this for a long time. And yet I participate in about 4 different superintendent groups where they're just roundtable learning environment think tanks, urban education dialogue, Southern California superintendents. I participate in, suburban school superintendents and groups like that just to say, what are you doing? Now, how are you being so successful? So Michael Fullen has said there's no greater investment than the investment in the capacity and capability of your talent. And I say, hear, hear.
It matches up for me when I'm working with PLCs. My favorite question on the table is, what do the students need us to learn?
Yeah, I love that.
So once you take a look at the assessment data that you've just collected, that's really the question: is the kids need us to learn something? We've certainly done everything we knew to do. So if we're looking for change, it means change has got to start with us learning something new.
Yeah, absolutely love that.
I'm wondering, in the stint that you served as the director of the ACSA, I'm wondering if there's insights that came out of that time of working at that state level that impacted your work back in the superintendency.
Yeah, it's a great question. And what a blessing for me to have had that opportunity to be in service to leaders in their schools and districts all over the state and some around the country as we did that work. I think one of the things that was alarming is that you recognize when you're at the state level that far too often the systems are created to benefit the interest of adults and not protect the rights and needs of students. We think public education what's for our students. And when you look at the ed code and you look at the way decisions are made at the Capitol, it's hard to argue that that's true, right? That we are really here for the students. And so what does it take to then flip that on its ear? It takes courage, right? And what I saw as the executive director of the Association of California School Administrators was great courage around the state, courage to do the right work because people are getting it right. They're getting it right in all kinds of places, right? And they're getting it right because they have the courage to do what they know works and what we all know works. John Hattie says, we don't need to learn what works. We know what works. We've known what works for a long time. We just have to have the courage to do what we know works, right? And I saw that. But I'll tell you, I never saw that courage on display more than during the pandemic, right? And I'll never forget, about 10 days before California shut down the state, I got a call from Chris Hoffman, the superintendent of Elk Grove, one of the largest school districts in California. And he's like, Wes, I need support from the governor. I've got 10 kids right now that have this COVID thing that we were just hearing about, right? What are we supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? So I'm on the phone with the governor's staff saying, hey, we need support. We're starting to hear all around the state these schools popping with positive tests. Well, we don't know. We think we got under control. It's a local decision, site-based decision, right? Your folks have to lead. Okay, all right. So I tell Chris Hoffman, hey, Chris, we're not going to get an answer from the state. So what do you need from us? He said, I need cover because I'm going to close my school down for a week, or my schools. He has lots of them, right? I think there's 60,000 students, right? I'm going to close my schools down for a week. The governor came on a press conference Monday, I think that was on a Friday, and he said, in response to that, the superintendents in California have to have more courage. We can't be fear-based, right? Kind of criticized Chris for doing that. Well, I think it was then 7 days later, the state shut down and shut down for years, right? Chris had the courage to do what he knew was going to protect his students. And then throughout the pandemic, we saw leaders, right? Classroom leaders, certainly district leaders, school leaders, figuring out how do we feed our family? So we saw food lines across the nation, right? Where schools were the cafeterias for communities, right? Books, supplies, then technology. And then how do we start to intentionally educate students again? How do we directly educate those students who are at home, who are suffering? Then how do we provide mental health supports for these students that are going through a crisis and a trauma never imagined in public education before, right? And our leaders did that. They did it throughout. And then when it was a tough time to reopen schools, especially in California, because people's salaries are kind of guaranteed, even if they didn't show up in person, right? How do you get people to do that? And leaders all around the state of California figured it out. So I saw great courage. I saw such courage that it inspired me to want to be courageous when I got back into the work. And so I think about that often. Do I have the courage every day to do what needs to be done to benefit 18,000 kids?
Awesome. Awesome mission question there. I love it. Love it. Um, I'm wondering what you would identify as some of the big challenges facing superintendents currently across the state as well across the nation. Are there a couple of things that kind of pop out top of that list?
I think, I mentioned that, we know what works, and we certainly have to have the courage to do it, but we also have to navigate myriad distractions, right? And some of those distractions are intentional and ill-intended, right? So we see, especially in political cycles, rather, during election years, how distracted we become by all of the other things we have to deal with, right? And so we see all around the country, really, and here in California as well, the intentional distractions by political interest. And I'm saying on both sides. This isn't a them or us. This is everybody, both sides, doing this. And public education becomes the talking point because it's easy, right? Because when you start talking about harming kids, oh, everyone's listening. We can't harm kids. Some people are like, I raise my taxes, whatever. I don't mind as long as blah, blah. Or, cost of gas. Yeah, I care, but, but you're going to hurt kids? Oh, my gosh, you can't hurt kids, right? And politicians know this, right? So every presidential cycle or election year, we start hearing about it, and they start blaming and telling stories that aren't accurate. And so here we are trying to do the work amidst all of this upheaval, and you look around and we've got book banning going on. We've got attacks on students' rights. Certain student groups are being called out all the time. And they say, well, I'm not against those students. I just despise X. Well, those students associate with X, right? And so you say you care about kids, and yet kids hearing that are not going to feel safe, heard, seen, or valued, right? And so I think all of that, this culture war as it's been described, is really impacting our students. And so not only do we as educators have to stand on that front line and say, we're going to educate these kids and help them be well every day, we're also going to have to defend their wellness in these courts of public opinion and debate. And so I worry because I know that weighs on leaders all around the state. And it has real impact too, right? So there's a superintendent down here in Southern California that to me is just a legend. Right? She was in a district with a lot more, I would identify as student maybe need than surrounding districts, because she had higher numbers of English learners, higher numbers of free or reduced lunch. Difficult populations we've seen historically are hard to make sure they're exceeding expectations. She was doing it. Right? She was doing it for years. Her students, similar students, were outperforming mine, right? And we have more resources. But her board flipped because of political interests, and they fired her without cause. Right? This person who's a rock star, who you look at the data and you're like, you can't fire that person. And the only thing that she did besides crush it for students, all students, was say, I'm going to put our students first, right? She got fired. Well, she got picked up right away. Now she's in another district doing great work. But those kinds of things are real. They're happening all over the state of California. I suspect they're happening all over the nation. And so, how do we show up prepared to get fired, to do the right thing? Alberto Carvalho, I've heard him say this many times. He's the soup at LAUSD now, and he was at Miami-Dade. He says, I show up to work every day trying to get fired, right? I'm going to do the right thing with the intention that if you can't handle the right thing, then you're going to have to let me go and find someone else, right? but that's
But
tough, right? That's tough to do, and people are facing that all over the country.
you gave me two great words that I'm going to be pondering with going ahead. The concept of courage uh, alongside the concept of distraction. Because when your courage is being tugged at by the distraction, I mean, I definitely see those two words as an awesome play of being able to make that day-to-day kinds of decisions that you have to make.
Yeah, yeah, that's how I see it.
Um, I'm wondering what you would say, especially for people who are new to school leadership as a superintendent, or that whole audience out there that's pondering whether that's a direction that they want to take or not. I'm wondering what do you label as the rewards that a person in your role receives by taking on this task?
Oh, you get to see our students thriving. There's nothing for me more rewarding than walking through a classroom and seeing a student get it. To be at a graduation and see students walk across that stage, to be at one of our continuation environments where students struggle with some challenges, but they figured it out. But not just the students, seeing adults and how good it feels for them to have been a part of all those things I just mentioned, right? It's such a feel good profession, right? I tell people every day, I have the opportunity every single day to save lives, right? My daughter is an emergency room doctor. She certainly saves lives. But our teachers, our site leaders, our classified folks, um, our superintendents, they save lives every day. That feels good. And that's why I got back into the work, at the state level. Um, I didn't have to deal with reopening schools. I did with all the negotiations between state entities, but actually doing it, I didn't have to. And I decided um, during the last couple of years of the last year of the pandemic being shut down and then reopening to jump back into the work. People are like, "You're out of your mind. Why are you doing that?" Because I missed it. I missed seeing those students thrive. I missed seeing the adults supporting those students, um, glowing, right, with positive pride. And so I love that part, and I wouldn't do anything else.
As I'm listening to you, the word future keeps coming to my mind. You're
Yeah,
that's you're getting glimpses of the future and the possibilities as you make all those observations you're making.
yeah. Well, I mean, I was walking through. We did a summer school, an expanded learning program for 4,000 students. So that's a big chunk of our student population. We're talking about 7:30 to 4:30 at night, really rich. We had core academics, we had enrichment activities, we had the arts, we had nutrition, and we did things like STEM and STEAM and entrepreneurial classrooms, right? And so I'm walking through a classroom and this girl said, "Let me tell you about my pitch." And she's a fourth grader. And I said, "Your pitch?" She goes, "Yeah, we're Shark Tanking tomorrow. I've got a pitch. I want to practice my pitch on you." She doesn't know me from Adam, but she just knows I'm walking through classrooms. And I said, "All right, give me your pitch." And she said, "Freeze-dried smoothies. Imagine this. You're out in the desert and you want a smoothie, right? But you don't have water, right? There's no smoothie stand, but you have your package of freeze-dried smoothies. You can be refreshed. It tastes good. And my smoothies are all natural, all good ingredients." And I'm like, "All right, well, that's great." I said, "Do you need water?" And she says, "No, you're not listening. You're in the desert. You don't have water. You just put the freeze-dried smoothie in your mouth. It rehydrates in your mouth." She goes, "And our smoothies, right? It's not going to be like a bag of potato chips where you open it up and only half the bag is full. We're going to fill our bags to the top, right? You talk about the future, right? That's our future, right? Those students thinking through things like that, nutrition, customer service, being better than generations before them. Absolutely. It's about glimpses of our future, and it's inspiring.
Well, Wesley, it's been inspiring for me to be able to record this podcast with you. Before we close out, I'm wondering if there's an easy way that listeners might want to get in touch with you with a question or thoughts that they want to share with you.
Yeah, my email here is wsmith@nmusd.us. That's probably the easiest. I check that
That's great.
every day. Yeah,
That's great. We'll put that in the lead into the podcast so folks can find it and connect with you.
perfect.
And any closing words that you'd like to share with our listening audience as many are looking at the startup of a new school year right now?
This is just something I tell myself every day, and so I'll share this. Um, and that quite simply is our students are watching, right? My students are watching. What I do, how I behave, the time I put in, the energy I bring, they're watching. And that motivates me. That motivates me.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Steve, thank you for the time.